Hey, what's happening, everybody? Today we're going to talk about brakes. We're going to go from the race car, the cockpit, out to the brake, rotors, the calipers, everything in between, and then we're going to break down all the difference in the brakes we offer: steel, tie, stainless, aluminum. Coming up next. Hi, I'm Billy Dietrich, sprint car mechanic and driver. I've been around racing my whole life, and it's pretty much all I know. We created this channel to share the good and the bad and everything in between. Our crew may not be the most experienced or professional, but we get it done and we have a good time doing it. We'll show you what it's really like racing weekly at some of the best tracks in central Pennsylvania. I'm also going to share some sprint car tutorials, mechanics, and parts, and whatever else I feel like. So like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. And enjoy the ride. Yeah, boy. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the master cylinder. Everybody, we'll just scroll over here to the inside of the cockpit real quick. I'm just going to point some things out and then I'll explain them as we go. So, master cylinder, in case you don't know, this is the master cylinder. They come out with these black master cylinders, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago. This is a 7/8 bore, which is the size of the piston in here. It's 7/8 in diameter. So, what that means is, well, let me back up here 1 second. So there's different sizes in master cylinders. We get this question a lot here at the shop. What size should I run? What's the difference? Why would you run one versus the other? So I personally have 2 brakes on the car, a left front brake and an inboard brake. So I run a 7/8 master cylinder. If you had 3 brakes on the car, so you had a left rear, an outboard or a right rear outboard brake, you're going to need a bigger master cylinder. In other words, you're moving more fluid. So you're going to need to go either to a 1-inch, which is probably the most popular next step up, or if you had more brakes, you need to move more fluid, you need a bigger cylinder. So the piston inside, you're pushing on it, it's moving more fluid, the bigger diameter. So 7/8 is what I run. The flip side of that question is, what's the difference when it comes to the driver? And here's the best way I've been able to describe this to everybody is a 7/8 master cylinder versus, say, a 1-inch is the 7/8 is almost like your throttle pedal. In other words, you're going to have more feel through the pedal. When you're pushing on the pedal, it's going to have some give. You're going to be able to push through the pedal and feel it. Where a 1-inch with 2 brakes, it's going to get rock hard. You're going to push on, you're going to have just a hard pedal, and you're going to have to push a lot, give it a lot of effort with your brake foot to get more stopping power, if that makes sense. Throttle pedal, obviously you got all that travel. So that's what I mean by the 7/8. You can kind of feel through it. You're going to have more feel on the pedal versus just a solid pedal. All right, the third piece of this puzzle is the brake lines, and they come right off the back of the residual valve. We come right off of there with a T, which is right here. And then we got one line going to the back, and then the bottom line goes out to the front caliper. So it's pretty straightforward. These are number 3 lines. It's what we use, what we recommend. I know some guys mess around with a number 2 or a number 3N with a number 2 line. I've messed with that a little bit years ago. I didn't feel like it was a benefit. I actually didn't feel like it worked as well. So I went back to the number 3 stuff. So I'm just going to show you here. It's pretty straightforward. Just the brake line coming back. We've got a short line off the cylinder coming back here to the back of the rear. And if you want to move your camera to the back here, you can probably see it maybe a little better. I just have a union here. I do not use the bulkhead and the tab, and I'll explain to you why then. Then we just got another flex line running down into the caliper. Pretty normal stuff. Runs to the inside of the caliper. Now up to the front side, we'll just come up front here. Same deal, just a line coming off the master cylinder. I got it fastened here on this panel, and then it just runs up along the frame rail here to this union right here, and then to the front caliper. All right, so you might be wondering, why don't I use a bulkhead? Why don't I secure that line hard to the chassis? And it's pretty simple. In the case that you do get in a crash, which, let's face it, the front end crash is more common. If the line is mounted solid to the frame with a tab and a bulkhead, there's no give here, okay? So I would rather take the chance of ripping the line loose from, I use tape on here, or you can use wire ties, ripping that loose and saving the actual line. Why is that important? Well, if you're in a hurry to change front ends, one less step would be bleeding the brakes, okay? You might be saying, I could probably already see it. Well, why don't you use a quick disconnect? Well, I just don't use the quick disconnect. I never did. So I just use the union. Now, if you did have the quick disconnect here, you could just pop it apart, put it back together. That's a different story, maybe, because same deal kind of, pertains to that too. If the line gets busted off at the fitting, you're gonna have to re-bleed the line. So I just fasten the line I just use electrical tape, like I said, no hard fastening there. That's the brake lines. All right, so now let's talk about the brake pedal itself, and then we'll get into bleeding brakes, kind of all in one here. So the brake pedal in my car is titanium. We'll roll in here quick. And what I want to explain about the brake pedal, which I know people, this has been a problem, is brake pedal travel. So I'm going to put my tape measure down here. These brakes are already bled. Can't even talk right. So roughly I have 5 1/4 inches from the front of the pedal to the firewall, okay? So, and I'll just show you here, we just bled these brakes last night. Boom, solid pedal. So it moves, I don't know, an inch or so to have a solid pedal. Now you might wonder why this is important to talk about. And I'm gonna tell you why. If you don't have enough travel when you're bleeding your brakes, in other words, you gotta have enough travel to push the fluid through the master cylinder, okay? So to me, that's kind of minimum travel. If you got room, you might want a little more, but it kind of fits my foot good there. And if you had a big foot and you weren't comfortable, maybe your seat position didn't allow you to bend your foot, you could always adjust your pedal after it's bled. But you need to have enough travel so when you're bleeding your brakes, you can push that piston all the way and get get the fluid moving through all the lines and get the air out of the whole system. So that's the first part about bleeding brakes. All right, so the second thing I want to talk about when it comes to actually bleeding the brakes is how we bleed the brakes. Now, I know there's several different ways out there to do it. Some people use a bottle with a pump. Some people like to just let them gravity feed over time. I'm not saying any of them are wrong or right or whatever. It's just the way we do it. We do it manually here. We take a two-man job, one person using the pedal, one person bleeding the brakes. So we'll start out here with the back, and we got our Willwood caliper. All this stuff's Willwood. We got our 2 bleeders, one on the outside, one on the inside, which you can't really see. But pretty straightforward. Pump the brakes up, and then you bleed the brakes until you don't get any air. Now, if your system's dry, this is going to be a process. You might start at the back, go to the front, and then do them both a couple times so you get a good solid pedal. Now, let's just go to the front. This is probably one of the most common phone calls, questions we get in the shop is, I bled my brakes, there's no air in them, but I don't have a good brake pedal. I don't understand. I did everything right, okay? So you just saw the rear brake, and the way that rear brake caliper is mounted, the bleeders are pointing straight up in the air. So all the air is going to go right to the top. So guys go to the front, and you don't know what you don't know, right? And this caliper is mounted on here, ready to go. But as you can see, the bleeders are horizontal. They're not vertical. So you can bleed them like this, but the problem is the air is going to get trapped in here. The pistons are right here. So just imagine a little bit of air getting trapped on both sides above the bleeders. Hence the reason why you don't have a good pedal. So what you have to do is you got to pull this caliper off the mount. 2 bolts, it's just the way it has to be done, right? Pull the caliper off, get these bleeders pointed up in the air. It could be as simple as, I've got a washer in there. That's it. Simple as rolling that straight back like that and getting these bleeders pointed straight up in the air. This is a must do. You cannot go racing and expect to have good brakes if you don't do this step. So yeah, get the caliper off, get the bleeders pointed straight up and down, so all that air that's in here, air is going to rise, it's going to go to the top, it's going to come out these bleeders. So that's how you want to bleed it. Just make sure that if for some reason you pull the caliper off like this and you're bleeding the brakes, it doesn't push on the brake pedal. It's going to push the pistons out, and you're going to have to start over again. So that's how you bleed the brakes. Probably the most important step right there. Get that caliper pointed up in the air so the air comes out. All right, now I want to talk about the actual brake components and what I use on my car. And we'll start up here in the front. I use a Willwood aluminum rotor. This is just a standard 11-inch rotor, standard Willwood left front caliper, just 2 pistons. Yeah, it's a little beat up. It's race proven here, but just like I said, aluminum rotor. I like the feel of the rotor versus the steel. It's light. They're relatively cheap. We'll get into all that in a little bit here. Use the purple pads, which is all standard stuff, and that's what I use on the front. So now we'll roll to the back here. I'll show you what we use in the back. Tyler just wants to step on back here. Now I use what I'm going to call the super light. That's just the name of it. The Willwood super light large caliper, 4 piston, just as you see right here. Takes the big pad, the 4 3/4 pad. Big rotor. Also, it's an 810 steel rotor. It's heavy, and it's the best brakes. Okay, that may be one of the big topics here we'll get into. But 810 rotor steel, it's heavy, but you're going to have the best brakes, most economical as well. And one other thing I just want to point out here, we got our Willwood mount. They've since come out with a different version of this, but that's the Willwood bracket. So everything Willwood, that's what I use on the 8 car. So we're over in the warehouse now. I'm gonna kind of show you guys the difference in the front brakes. We'll start with the front first, and then we'll move to the rear. I got some stuff set out here. I guess we'll start with this aluminum rotor, which you just saw in my car over there. Like I said, all this stuff is Willwood. We are Willwood guys. That's what we sell here. There's a couple calibers here to show you, but this is aluminum. All aluminum, left front rotors, 3 mounting spots, which is normal for all sprint car stuff. Like I said, we like the feel of it. It's not quite as aggressive as some of the other stuff, and I'll get into that in a second. But aluminum rotor, we can only use it on the front. They don't make one for the rear. It just wouldn't hold up in the rear. So that's the aluminum rotor, 11 inches in diameter, across, and standard, just a standard aluminum rotor. It's been around forever. Now, to the left here, I have a Willwood steel rotor. Now, you can see the shape is different. This is scalloped. It ultimately is the same 11 inches if you were able to measure from the longest distance across. So it uses the same bracket, mounts the same way, but it's made out of steel. And you're probably wondering, well, why would you run one versus the other? Typically, the steel rotor is going to be, in my opinion, a little more aggressive. It might just pull when you go on the brakes. It might want to turn the car a little harder to the left. The left front rotor, that's the whole purpose of that being on the left front, is obviously you turn left. Go on the brakes, it kind of turns to help turn the car to the left. So the other thing about the steel rotor that I don't care for, I should say, is it's heavy. So you got a steel rotor, it's heavy. I'm already heavy to begin with, so anywhere I can save weight, I'm trying to save weight. Now, the difference in these is probably, I didn't weigh the front rotors. I should have. I weighed the back. But I'm going to say it's probably more than double the weight difference here. Even though this is all scalloped out, it's just that much heavier. Now, there is one more option for the front that we carry, and it is this Willwood stainless steel front rotor. I actually got it here both ways, without the mount and with the mount. As you can see, it's got the 3 mounting brackets or points just like the other two, but it has a floating mount. So this rotor actually floats on these little spacers, these little T-nuts, and these bolts. So this rotor will actually float a little bit when you're running. So it'll kind of stay center, I guess you could kind of say. It has the ability to expand and contract with the heat on these slots here. So that's something that's relatively new when it comes to the front rotor technology with the Willwood stuff. It's pretty light for steel, and it's awful thin. So you see the difference here between the aluminum and the steel, stainless steel, I should say. The regular steel rotor is the same thickness as this aluminum. So it's really light for steel, and the price ain't that bad either. Now there's the 3 options for the front that we carry, all Willwood. Which one's better than the other? It's kind of personal preference. I would say we sell more of these 2 here more than anything. But you know, the stainless one is kind of catching on. It's a little more expensive. Here's the other difference, once I showed you the thickness of it. Here's the 2 calipers. The difference in the calipers as well. This caliper is the one you just saw in my car. It's a dual piston, 2 pistons, and this little clip holds the pads in, and that's just on there. It shouldn't even be on there, but it is. And so that's the standard left front caliper. Now you go with the stainless system, it takes a different caliper. This is a 4-piston caliper, 2 pistons on each side. If I can slide that over, maybe you can see it. There's 2 pistons in there, 1 on each side, or 2 on each side, I should say. So, and it's a little, it takes a different bracket. It's a wider mounting point here. As you can see there, it's not quite the same. So these are not interchangeable, I guess is where I'm going with this. So these 2 rotors over here, you could take one off, put one on, same bracket, same caliper. You would have to change pads, different compound pad because of the steel versus aluminum. The steel pad's going to be harder, aluminum's going to be softer. And then you got the stainless rotor in the front. So that's the front part of the brakes. Pretty straightforward. When we get to the back section, it's going to get a little more complicated. All right, well, before we go to the back, I figured I'll throw this in here too. The price. What's the difference in the price here? So there's $10 difference in the price here on these front rotors. It's $77.50 for an aluminum rotor. It's $87.50 for the steel. One thing I did want to mention that I don't have one up here, but we do carry, is they do make a full round steel rotor. Looks just like the aluminum, but it's steel. But it's, like I said, it's heavy, so we don't sell many of them. The stainless rotor is $155, so quite a big difference in price. Now, you know, the front caliper, the standard front caliper is $109. This whole kit, if you were to buy the kit, I got a price as a kit for them, is $549. So, you know, pretty substantial difference there too when it comes to, you know, not just the components, but the price. All right, so let's move on to the back half of the car and the rear brake. So we'll start with the one right here in the center. This is pretty much what I showed you on my car over there. The standard, this is a steel, a cast steel 810, which means the thickness of the rotors is 0.810 thick. And then the diameter is 12.19. So if you measure it across, it'd be 12.19. So this is a standard 810 rotor. We sell 2 versions of this. We sell a standard version, which is like $50, which is the good old standby rotor. And then there's an upgraded version, which it's a heavy duty version. It's got more pillar vanes in the center. It's a little stronger. So if you're harder on the brakes, you know, if you're going to go to the brakes a lot, use a lot of brakes, you're going to want to upgrade to the Spec 37 version, which we got both in stock here. So standard rotor, like I said next door, in my opinion, if you're looking to stop, like stop, not just have like okay brakes, it's hard to beat this steel rotor. Let me just step back 1 second here and say this. In central PA, I feel like we probably have the biggest braking problem, i.e. the hairpin turns. You know, the paper clip tracks. You got the Grove, long straightaways. hairpin turns. Lincoln's really the same way. Baps is the same way. Even Port Royal, I mean, for as big as the track is, I mean, sometimes the turns are fairly tight. The Sealands Grove is a different story, but in Central PA, we have a lot of tight radius turns, long straightaways. So brakes are really important, which is why you see some of these guys glowing their rotors. Okay, enough about the racetrack talk. So standard 810, we went over all that. This is the Willwood floater mount, very similar to the front rotor mount that I showed you. I'm not going to pick this up because I'm afraid about breaking the glass, but how you can look here, it's just got the, you know, this floats. You can't really see it here because it's brand new, but this actually floats. This plate and these slots right here, these nuts will actually float a little bit. So the rotor will be able to expand and contract with heat, okay, and keep the rotor from busting them out. All right, so we'll move to the caliper side. This is, oh, I got it upside down. It's real similar to what I have on my car next door. I said I have a Superlight. This is a next version of the Superlight. It's the 4-piston caliper, large. It's got the 4 3/4 pad, so you got a lot of pad surface. Okay, so you got 4 3/4 inches of pad surface on the rotor. Okay, so you're making contact on both sides. It's a lot of pad surface, so you're going to get a lot of braking power with this caliper and these pads. Now, some guys, the downfall of that is it's heavy. Okay, so I'll get into the weights of these rotors here in a second. So this is actually a radial mount, 4 3/4 caliper. The one I have on my car is a Superlight, so the mount itself is molded to the caliper. So this is an additional piece that you don't necessarily need to have. Okay, and I'll get into that, why that is here in a second. So there's the heavy duty. I'm going to call the good old standby 810 rotor with the heavy duty caliper. So that's what's been around forever, okay? All right, so the next one I'm going to talk about is this Willwood stainless steel rotor. As you can see, it's scalloped in shape to save weight. It's made out of stainless steel, and it's lighter. It's definitely lighter than the 810 we were just looking at. Same mount as that one there. This has got the back side of the mount. This is what actually, let me stand this up here. This actually clamps to the axle. There's 2 bolts here. There's 2 mounting points here. They clamp it down. If you can see them bolts in there, Heather. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, on the opposite side is where all these nuts are that bolt the rotor to that. So, stainless steel. It's lighter than the 810. And it's a smaller diameter. Okay, so I just showed you the other caliper with the radial mount, and this is why you may need a radial mount. So not all of these rotors are the same diameter. Where I told you that's 12.19, this is 11 3/4, smaller diameter. Hence the reason why you need to have a radial mount. See, this mount is adjustable. See these spacers in here, these washers. So you can use this caliper on a shorter rotor or a tall rotor. That's why you need the spacer to space it in, space it out. Now this is what I'm gonna call a standard. Oop, I'm gonna drop them pads out of there and break the glass. This is your standard stainless steel kit. That price is for just the caliper, no bracket. 4-inch pad. So you got a smaller caliper. As you can see, it's smaller than this one. Big difference, right? See the huge difference in the size, which equals a smaller pad. So you're going to lose 3/4 of an inch on each pad, you know, contact patch, I'm going to say, on the rotor. So this is going to be lighter all around. Lighter caliper, lighter pads, lighter rotor. I personally haven't used one of these yet. I'm still on the 810, but I might switch to this sometimes this year when we go to the bigger tracks where brakes aren't quite as important. I'm going to flip this over before I break anything. So stainless rotor, smaller caliper, lighter. All right, so probably the newest thing Willwood's came out with for the sprint car is a tie rotor. Now, they've had some other rotors in the past, but this is a tie rotor, all titanium. Takes the same mount as the other ones I just showed you. It's light. As you can see, it's not as thick. It's thin. It's probably like 3/8, quarter to 3/8 thick, and it's light. So with that, kind of like the front one we talked about, takes a different caliper. As you can see here, this caliper is narrow for the narrow rotor, where you look at these other calipers and they have a wide gap here for the wide rotor. Big difference, right? So small caliper, just like the stainless one, takes a small pad, takes a different pad. So it takes a different pad than some of these other rotors because it's a different material. And I should have touched on that with the stainless rotor too. I forgot about that. So different pad compounds for different rotor materials. Tie versus the stainless versus the cast iron. All may take a different compound pad to get the optimal brake. So keep that in mind. If for some reason you're switching stuff around, you're going from one to another, you need to know what for pads you have and what pads you need. Now, one thing that I'm sure people are going to ask is, what's the weight difference? So I have a little cheat sheet here because I was comparing weights for myself. And we'll just start with the heavy duty rotor. Just the rotor, these are without the mounts, just the rotor themselves. It's a little over 9 pounds. So it's probably like 9.2 pounds for just this standard 810 rotor. So if we go over here to the stainless rotor, smaller in diameter, stainless steel rotor is 4.4 pounds. So basically 5 pounds lighter than this 810 rotor. So that's a lot of weight you're saving, plus saving weight on the caliper. I got that too. Then we go to the tie rotor. Ultimate weight savings here. This tie rotor is 3.4 pounds. So you're saving a ton of weight here, starting from the heavy rotor all the way down to this rotor. So you're almost saving 6 pounds by going with the tie rotor versus the heavy rotor. Okay. Now the other weight savings factor is going to be the caliper itself. So what you gain, I just want to throw this out there, what you gain in weight savings, you may be giving up in some performance. So keep that in mind. The heavy caliper with pads, 6.8 pounds. Okay. The small caliper with pads, you're looking at 4.5 pounds. So basically a little over two pounds in weight savings there. Now, so there's the skinny on the rotors and the weight. Now, some people are going to probably say, well, what about durability? What's going to last longer? So on and so forth. I'm going to spend the money, which we'll get to that in a second. What's going to be my best bang for my buck? That's really going to depend on you and your driver. I really don't have a good answer for that. I can tell you that this steel rotor that I use, I'm probably not super hard on brakes like Double D. He's really hard on brakes. Anthony Mackey's hard on brakes. Their rotors aren't going to last as long, but I probably run my rotor, boy, I don't know, half the season, maybe. Depends. I mean, it may be, when I say half the season, let's just say, that's probably a little too much, probably a third of the season. Just say 20 races I might get out of an 810 rotor, a heavy duty rotor. These stainless rotors, I know from talking to Danny, they aren't gonna, his don't last quite as long, but he's hard on the brakes. So that's all gonna depend on your braking and how much brakes you use. All right, so let's talk about the price of these rear rotors, okay? We'll start with the 810 rotor. The standard 810 is $50. It's cheap, okay? You can go to the heavy duty rotor, the Spec 37 rotor, $130. So pretty cheap for brakes, right? So we'll go to the stainless rotor, just the rotor itself. Well, here, the whole kit, this whole kit's $770. Just the rotor is $199. So $200 for just the rotor. So, but you need a different caliper versus that one. So you're looking at $770 for the kit or $200 for just the rotor. Now we'll go over to the tie one, right? So the tie kit, $1325. Now the kit includes the caliper, the pads, the rotor, the bracket, the mount, everything you see. Okay. Just the rotor, $765. So obviously, as you can tell, when you want to go lighter, you're got to dig a little deeper in your pocket. All right, well, that's going to be a wrap on the video. Hopefully, maybe you even learned something. By all means, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call the shop here, call RUPW, talk to me or Danny. If you have any questions on what we're selling and what we have here, or technical questions. Like I said, don't hesitate or comment below. And I appreciate all the comments. So that's the story. Well, wood brakes is what we have here. It's what we use, what we sell. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you next time.